So the United States and our NATO ally Turkey in a standoff over Syria. President Trump spoke by phone with the Turkish president yesterday. Trump urging Turkey to scale back attacks on Kurdish forces, saying such moves threaten the fight against ISIS in the region. American officials say the battle in Syria is winnable.
Half of the territory of Syria is outside the control of the Assad regime, and I think that we see a path forward, although a tenuous one, that we have to attend to every day in Syria that might lead to a better, safer, more stable political solution. And so at this stage, we're maintaining our military presence, but we have a strong diplomatic plan, 5-point plan, and Secretary Tillerson's very engaged.
Now let's bring in Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, a former Green Beret commander and counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Cheney, the author of Warrior Diplomat, and also running for Congress now in the Florida's 6th District. Glad to have you here. We had talked about this before, Michael, that you had all these different entities working together for a common goal to destroy ISIS, but there was no plan for what was going to happen afterwards. Listen to what the Wall Street Journal wrote today in this editorial page. Now that the U.S. and Kurds have done the dirty work, Russia, Syria, Turkey, and al-Qaeda want to push the U.S. out. If they succeed, Mr. Trump will pay a price in lost credibility on par with Mr. Obama's failure to enforce his famous red line on chemical weapons. Is that too strong or about right?
Well, I think it's certainly right that all of those actors would like to see the U.S. out of the way, and they would like to see Syria resolved in line with their own interests, some of which align, some of which don't. One of the things that I think that article really didn't touch on, though, was Iran's role, which has seen more in the way of gains in establishing that land bridge we've talked about from western Afghanistan through Iraq, through Syria, to Lebanon, to be able to threaten Israel in the Mediterranean. Iran has seen more gains in the last 10 years, particularly under the Obama administration, than in the last 1,000. So I don't think it really addressed that piece. But I think really what, the bottom line here is that the United States is going to have to remain engaged. I think President Trump was absolutely right to tell Erdogan and Turkey to knock it off and to back off. And at the same time, we're going to have to be very firm with the Kurds that there better not be a single Turkish civilian or soldier hurt, while we're working with them.
Let me ask you this. I've been curious to ask someone with experience on both on the military side and on the diplomatic side.
Right.
What do you think would happen, and would you advise President Trump to begin to have a conversation with NATO allies about removing Turkey from NATO?
No, not at this point. I would not. We have to continue to work with. The Turks. They're a critical ally in a number of ways, both in the terms of the size of their military, which is substantial and one of the largest in NATO, and then also its location. Everything from an intelligence assets to it being a choke point to the Black Sea. We have to work with the Turks. We have great relationships throughout their national security apparatus. Really, the problem is, in many ways, is Erdogan and the political piece that he has put in place. But we have to keep, bottom line, we have to keep Turkey in the fold. We have to work this out and stay engaged.
All right. Well, I'll take that off my list of things that I think you should do. When it comes to the Kurds, do we owe them more than what they're getting from us right now?
Well, I think the Trump administration made a bold move in getting the Kurds some heavier weapons. That's how they were able to defeat ISIS once and for all as a state. Mind you, they are not defeated as a movement, but in terms of as a state, they are. And I think we need to keep, I think the policy is correct, keep a smaller group of advisors on the ground, supported by the Air Force and our assets, but that also keeps us as somewhat of a buffer between the Turks and the Kurds, and to keep the region from devolving against chaos, and finally shifting from ISIS to dealing with Iran. It's Sunni extremism to dealing now with Shia extremism.
All right. Thanks for bringing us your expertise. We appreciate it. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dana.